Obviously, we have to talk about this. We'll take a little bit of a back and forth approach to this because there's so many layers. But Penn State now, there's some drama to what's going on. Lost two in a row, one to a really good Iowa team, the other one to a team that they should have beat the piss out of, right? And so you have that. Then you come into this week, and James Franklin has a press conference where he mentions his focus is on Illinois, where he mentions the horseshoe as the big house. There is a report of a new agent that came out this week, and he claims that the change was made over the summer, but regardless, there's that conversation going on. And then there are the rumors about USC and LSU and some of these other opportunities. And he hasn't done the Mike Tomlin, there's not a big enough check that one of these boosters could write that would make me leave my job type of denial of some of these rumors. And so they're in a very precarious position as a program now to be in a position to lose three in a row. And also there are questions about the future of this program in terms of coaching. I mean, what do we make of this?
Yeah, man, it's super frustrating. And it's one of those things where I think you bring up a great point about the Mike Tomlin thing. And if Coach Franklin, he could nip all of this in the butt, get this distraction the hell out of here by simply coming out and saying, like, I'm here. But as an outsider looking in, and also having been in the politics of the game of football at every level, there's only one reason for him to not do that. And that's because he is keeping every door open. And really, so I was looking through Twitter today and I found an interesting tweet, and her name's Mary Beth Schmidt, and it caused a little bit of ruckus within the Penn State, beat world, people doing it. She's a 2022 alumni candidate for the Board of Trustees. And her tweet goes, "In light of all the recent Penn State football speculation, here's a question to consider. What does Penn State football stand for? Not what did it stand for over the last 10 years, but through the next 10, what does it stand for?" And I think that's a very, very deep and honest and merited question moving forward, because although Coach Franklin came in and has done a fantastic job recruiting outside of the offensive line position, in my opinion, he's gotten guys in there. I think where he lacks at that skill set and at that position is really true talent evaluation.
Yeah.
Because although Penn State is on a pedestal and it is able to compete with the likes of Ohio State in the world, there's still an element of Penn State where they go out and they get that 2-star that just ends up being an all-pro and an all-American, or an all-American for you in 2 years, because maybe he's under-recruited, maybe he's not playing great competition, whatever it may be. But being able to truly evaluate the talent at a minute level and see it at a young age and get that kid involved, I think that's where it's lacking. I think that's where they found gold sometimes, especially up front. Now he's just kind of going out and offering every 5-star that he can and trying to get him in there, right? And stars don't always define players, and you know that, and I know that. But I guess in light of that tweet, my question for you is, as an outsider, because I have my own opinion, and I think Penn State's kind of one of those special programs in terms of how they've done things. And you can say whatever you want about Joe. He ran a really tight ship, and it was a very unique ship, and how he did things and what he expected out of his players within that program. And I know it's super, super hard because of how long he was there for anybody to step in there and not be compared to him. But I think there's a unique way where you can embrace it. And although I think Coach Franklin embraced it on the surface and he said all the right things, I don't necessarily know if he embraced it wholesomely. That's my opinion.
Sure.
As an outsider looking in, and a guy who's a Big Ten guy and who loves ball, what is your opinion on that? What do you see? And do you see there's this distance in there, or just go? I really want to hear it from somebody else.
It's super interesting that you asked that question, because it's a literal thought that I had earlier today. So I'll start off by saying this. And there's, because I saw this conversation on Twitter, and I think that it's a really unique conversation. There are a lot of people, obviously Penn State supporters, but other people in the football community that see Penn State as a destination job where somebody would want to go there and they would want to coach there and end their career there. There are a lot of people that view Penn State as a second tier job, a great job where you can build a career and you can have a ton of success, but ultimately there is another stepping stone to your career, whether it is like an Ohio State in the same conference, or whether you're looking at a USC, and LSU, some of the names that have popped up. I believe that the latter is how James Franklin has viewed the job. And coming in, I think he was a good candidate for the job because of what he did at Vanderbilt. He turned a team that was a doormat of their conference into a top 25 team. And he recruited guys, and he changed the way that they operated there. And what Penn State was going through at the time, which you well know, is they needed a cheerleader and a recruiter and somebody who could revitalize and bring energy. But it always seemed like there were rumors swirling every time Penn State got hot that James Franklin was going to be somewhere else. Those rumors don't come up out of nowhere. Like the candidate list is something that people in the media can create. But the legit rumors are typically leaked by ADs and agents who are trying to figure out. An AD puts it out there to see how their fan base receives a certain candidate. An agent puts it out there so their person is in the conversation, or they can try to get more money out of the school that they're with. And I felt like, and this is not an indictment on James Franklin, because I think he's done a very good job there, but there was always a feeling that this was never the destination for him. I also believe that coming off of a legendary coach, you're in a little bit of an impossible situation. Obviously, Bill O'Brien was there and did a really good job, but he was only there for a couple of years. So James Franklin comes in, and I'm not exactly sure that you can ingratiate yourself to the community the same way a legend like Joe Pa could. I'm not exactly sure that your family is ever going to feel as comfortable than Joe Pa's family felt in State College. And so I think that is a part of maybe the psychology of what has transpired here, is a guy who understood the opportunity, has tried to make the most out of it, has revamped recruiting. And I agree with you, outside the offensive line, done a really good job with recruiting to Penn State, with the backdrop that there was going to be potentially another opportunity for him out there in the world of college football. And that's kind of the way that I see it. And it's really interesting now because you mentioned it, and I totally agree with it. He left the door open intentionally, because if this was the place for him to be, the conversation would have ended at, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to be into the future, period. If this was what he wanted long-term, he would never switch agents. I don't care if he actually did it this week. I don't care if he did it in the summer. And you know this from having representation. I'm the same way. Like the reason why I would consider new representation is because of the opportunities that come along with it.
Right.
Period. And so it's a really unique, and I've said this before, precarious spot that Penn State is in because of what's transpired on the field, but also now you have things that are up in the air as you evaluate this program and leadership into the future. And I'm curious to see how it plays out and the timeline that it plays out in. But this always seemed like a place that James Franklin definitely enjoyed coaching at, but did not see himself finishing his career in State College.
Here's where I kind of I hear you, but I also disagree, where from the standpoint of, I think had he been able to come in and had the team experienced the level of sustained success that he wanted, and really that bar is being able to beat Ohio State consistently, not once every 8 years, but consistently. I think had he been able to do that, because I think Penn State's a place, I think they're further along than Michigan in that regard. I think Penn State's a place who can do that. and it's not taking anything away from Ohio State because they've been great, and you can't take anything away from what they've done.
Sure.
But my point being is I feel that a place like Penn State should be able to year in, year out compete with Ohio State at a very, very high level. Really the way it was, even towards the end there, Joe got a couple licks in. But still, I think Penn State's a place that can do that. And I think had he been able to do that, I think the narrative would have been a little different. And to me, I think James is at the point in his career, and I'm going to let you go after this. He's at the point in his career now where he's chasing that. He wants to be a college football playoff coach. And I think the reason the USC job is so
appealing,
tantalizing and appealing to him is that he no longer has to go through the giant of Ohio State, and that conference is wide open. And when you want to talk about his strengths as a coach, which are not X's and O's. It is he's not a ball guy. He's a recruiter. This is the brand. This is the image. I'm going to bring guys in that can do that can handle that side of it for me. There's no better place to do it than LA. There's no better place.
That's what I was getting to is I don't disagree with you at all about Penn State being the team in the East that should be able to year in and year out go toe-to-toe with Ohio State.
They need a ball coach. They need a guy who's an X's and O's guy.
That is 100%. James Franklin probably isn't the coach for that. I think that he is a great recruiter. I think he can build a program. When you talk about getting to that point that puts it over the top, I'm not exactly sure he's that guy, which is totally fine when you're at USC, because all you have to do is beat Oregon, which is a team that's beatable in the Pac-12, and you can recruit whoever the hell you want to. It seems like all the best quarterbacks in college football right now are California guys, they're West Coast guys, right? So he can get those guys, the program-changing quarterback, to stay in the state of California, and he can recruit wide receiver talent there. He can recruit offensive linemen out of the West Coast, the Samoan guys that people like to recruit they are phenomenal football players. He can get those guys, and then he can cast his net nationally to say, okay, where do we need to go? Do we need to go to Texas or Florida or Georgia to go out and get that 5-star elite pass rusher? He can get that guy, and he can do that on the West Coast. I think Ohio State, and this is, again, not to disparage any program in the Big Ten right now, it seems a little bit insurmountable, just the way that they have been able to collect talent over years and have been able to hire the right coaches over years has put them in a position to have continued success. James Franklin has put this Penn State program in a pretty good position to be able to do that. There has to be somebody to get it over the top, and he probably understands that his best opportunities, if he wants to be a playoff guy, might be elsewhere. And that's not a knock on him. That's self-awareness.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it is. And it sucks for Penn State, and it sucks for the fans, because I know how those fans are. They get so attached so quickly because of what they've been used to and consistency they've been used to. But, maybe, like I said, maybe if everything ends up transpiring, they need to hit a home run with this next hire. And it needs to be a guy who's in it for the long haul, who's an X's and O's guy, and who can take the level of recruiting seriously to the level that James took recruiting, maybe not that level, but also balance it out with being a ball guy and not sacrificing too much on either end, and be able to go from what James built there, be able to build on what James built there from a recruiting standpoint, but also now bringing an identity from an X's and O's standpoint that I think's been lacking just because of the turnover with the offensive coordinators. I mean, Brent Pry's been there for a while, but even defensive coordinators.
All right. So where do you go there then? If you're looking to hire and you're Penn State, who would be your guys? I've got a couple of guys that are top of mind for me. I'm sure we probably have a little bit of crossover, but what are you thinking?
Yeah. Well, a very interesting one would be, and this is just me wanting to see if A, he's got the balls to do it, and B, if there's not a little bit of unfinished business, would be getting O'Brien back there. I don't know how good that would be just in terms of messaging and transitioning back into it, but from an X's and O's guy, he's the guy, and he's also a guy who built a pretty strong class in my class as a recruiter. He wasn't as flashy as Coach Franklin, but he was
Yeah,
a very good talent evaluator. Another guy who I think would be fantastic would be Joe Moorhead.
that's my guy.
Yeah, I mean, getting Joe Moorhead back in there would be an unbelievable thing. You know, I was a huge supporter when he was up there. I think his persona, his core values as a human being mesh very well with what Penn State's core values are: blue collar, hard nose, get the job done. And then I'm sure there's some guys that are up and coming, but those two have been on the forefront of my mind. Another guy who's had a stint there, I don't think he's going to leave where he's at, but another interesting one would be Joe Brady down in Carolina. If someone was going to give a young guy a chance, got the flair, definitely has the X's and O's. Joe was a GA when I was there. I love the guy. We spent freaking hours. We called it the submarine. The GAs were in like a little sub office. He and I spent hours. And I think that'd be an interesting one. But, you know, I ultimately, like I said, I think it's got to be a ball guy who can embody that hard-nosed, blue-collar, let's get the shit done type mentality, and also be a great talent evaluator from a recruiting standpoint.
Yeah. So I'm with you on your analysis of what type of profile it has to be. And I love the names that you threw out there. I think Joe Moorhead would be a home run for a number of reasons. Like you said, he's an X's and O guy, which is going to be important. He has history at Penn State, and he had very successful offenses while he was there. And he's also a guy who it seems like has the blueprint out of anybody to beat an Ohio State team. And I think that's really important to this conversation, where he did it at Penn State and he did it at Oregon. And I think that is very important. Another name that is really interesting, and this one's kind of off the board, and it's somebody who I know, but I think it would be a great fit, is Jeff Hafley, who is the head coach of Boston College. And you look at the record at Boston College, and it's not outstanding, but that is a program that has some limitations to what they can do. Politically, obviously, being a Catholic school, they've got some things to deal with there, but it's also a really good academic school, so they can't just recruit anybody. And geographically, they're really limited in the type of players that would naturally want to go there. He coached at Pitt, so he's got Pennsylvania ties, and he coached with Ryan Day in San Francisco for some years, and they know each other very well. And so he's in the mind of Ryan Day, and he's a New Jersey guy. And me and you both have talked about the importance of the state of New Jersey. There are guys on Ohio State's roster from New Jersey that are balling out. There are guys on Penn State's roster from New Jersey that are balling out. And so if you can obviously own the state of Pennsylvania, which he has experience in, he can go back to New Jersey, a place that he knows and he's recruited heavily in the past, and then build from there. I think you've got something. And he isn't an offensive X's and O's guy, but he is one of the foremost defensive minds in the game right now. He's young, he's vibrant. I think it would make sense. So they've got some good options.
Yeah, I think I was going to ask you that from a defensive standpoint, because obviously my brain goes straight to offense. But I think just as easily as you could bring in an offensive guy, you can bring in a great defensive guy who has an offensive guy in his hip pocket who he trusts explicitly. And it could be that two-headed monster there, that messaging and putting it out there type standpoint could be really good.
Yeah, so this will be an interesting thing. It's a little bit of a drama now, but we'll watch it unfold. And obviously we'll have commentary throughout the rest of the year on it.